Monsieur Marambaud broke the seal of the letter handed to him by his servant, Denis, and a smile touched his lips. Denis had been in his service for 20 years. A short, stocky, perpetually cheerful man, he was considered throughout the district a model servant. "Please, sir, good news?" inquired Denis. Monsieur Marambaud was not a rich man. A former village apothecary and an old bachelor, he scraped by on a modest income, earned with difficulty from selling remedies to the local peasants. He replied, "Indeed, my friend, old man Malwa got cold feet, frightened by the lawsuit I threatened him with. Tomorrow I shall receive my money. 5,000 francs will be most useful in the household of a solitary man." And Monsieur Marambaud rubbed his hands together. By nature, he was a lethargic man, more inclined to despondency than to cheerfulness, incapable of sustained effort and careless in his affairs. Of course, he could have achieved greater prosperity by taking over the practice of some deceased colleague in a larger town and acquiring his clientele. However, the thought of the troubles associated with moving and all the worries he would have to shoulder invariably stopped him. After thinking it over for a day or two, he would usually conclude, "Very well, let's postpone it until next time. For now, I'm losing nothing. Perhaps a better opportunity will present itself." Denis, on the contrary, constantly urged his master to take action. Being of an active and energetic disposition, he never tired of repeating, "Ah, if only I had some starting capital, I could make a fortune, just 1,000 francs, and it would be in the bag." Monsieur Marambaud would merely smile in response and, without a word, go out into his small garden, where he would begin to pace, his hands clasped behind his back, immersed in vague reveries. All that day, Denis sang lively village songs, as if expecting something joyful. He even displayed unusual zeal, washing all the windows in the house. He polished the panes with fervor, never falling silent and bellowing his cheerful ditties. Monsieur Marambaud, surprised by such diligence, remarked to him several times with a smile, "If you carry on like this, my friend, there will be no work left for tomorrow." The next morning, around 10 o'clock, the postman handed Denis 4 letters for his master, one of which was particularly heavy. Monsieur Marambaud immediately locked himself in his room and did not emerge until well past noon. Then he ordered his servant to take 4 packages to the post office. One of them was addressed to Monsieur Malwa. In all likelihood, it was a receipt for the money. Denis did not ask his master a single question. That day, he appeared just as gloomy and sullen as he had been cheerful the day before. Night fell. Monsieur Marambaud went to bed at his usual hour and soon fell asleep. He was awakened by a strange noise. He raised himself in bed and listened intently. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Denis appeared on the threshold, holding a candle in one hand and a large kitchen knife in the other. His eyes were wide and fixed, his face contorted, as if he were in the grip of a terrible turmoil, and his pallor was so deathly that he resembled an apparition from the other world. Astonished, Marambaud thought that Denis might be sleepwalking, and was about to get up and rush towards him, when suddenly the servant blew out the candle and lunged at the bed. The master instinctively threw his hands forward, but immediately received a blow that threw him onto his back. Deciding the servant had lost his mind, Monsieur Marambaud tried to seize his hands to parry the blows raining down one after another. The first knife strike hit him in the shoulder, the second in the forehead, the third in the chest. He defended himself desperately, waving his arms in the darkness, fighting back with all his might with his legs and shouting, "Denis! Denis! Come to your senses, listen, Denis." But the other, breathing heavily, continued to strike in a frenzy, and, thrown back now by a kick, now by a punch, he furiously rushed forward again. Monsieur Marambaud received 2 more wounds in his leg and 1 in his stomach. But suddenly, a realization flashed through his mind like lightning, and he cried out, "Stop, Denis, stop! I didn't receive the money." The servant immediately froze. The master heard his wheezing, ragged breathing in the darkness. Gasping for breath, Monsieur Marambaud continued, "I received nothing. Monsieur Marambaud refuses to pay. We're going to court. That's why you took that letter to the post office. You'd better read the papers on my desk." Mustering his last strength, he reached for the nightstand, took the matches, and lit the candle. The entire bed was drenched in blood. Crimson streams had spattered the wall. The sheets, the curtains, everything was stained a deep red. Denis, also covered in blood from head to toe, was standing in the middle of the room. Seeing this, Monsieur Marambaud thought he was dying and lost consciousness. At dawn, he came to. Some time passed before his ability to feel, to think, and to remember returned. But suddenly, the memory of the attack, of the wounds inflicted, surfaced in his mind, and such horror seized him that he squeezed his eyes shut so as not to see anything. After a few minutes, the fear subsided slightly, and he began to reason. If he wasn't dead yet, there was a chance he could recover. He felt weak, very weak, but experienced no sharp pain, although an unpleasant burning sensation, as if from pinching, was felt in various parts of his body. Moreover, he was completely stiff, damp, and felt constricted, as if bound tightly with bandages. He remembered the spilled blood, and a shudder of horror ran through his body at the terrible thought that all that scarlet liquid soaking the bed had flowed from his own veins. The thought that he might see this horrifying sight again agitated him, and he clenched his eyes shut with all his might, as if they might open against his will. But what was he, Marambaud, to do now? Get up? Call for help? Yet the slightest movement would likely reopen his wounds, and he would die, bleeding out. Suddenly, he heard the bedroom door open. His heart froze. It was Denis, of course, returned to finish him off. He held his breath, so the murderer would think it was already over, the deed done. He felt the sheet being lifted, a cautious hand probing his stomach. A sharp pain in his thigh made him flinch. Now he was being washed with fresh water, so the crime had been discovered. He was being cared for, saved. A wild joy seized him, but, remaining cautious, he did not wish to betray his wakefulness, and, with the utmost trepidation, cracked open one eye. He saw Denis beside him. Denis himself. Merciful God! He instantly snapped his eyelids shut. Denis! What was he doing then? What did he want? What other terrible designs was he harboring? What is he doing? Ah, he's washing him to hide the evidence. Did he now intend to bury him in the garden, 10 feet deep, so no one would find the body? Or perhaps he would hide him in the cellar, among the wine bottles? And Monsieur Marambaud began to tremble so violently that his whole body quaked. He thought, "I am lost, I am lost," and in despair clenched his eyelids shut to avoid seeing the final knife blow. Yet the blow did not come. Now, Denis was lifting him and starting to apply bandages. Then he carefully dressed the wound on his leg, just as he had learned from his master when the latter was an apothecary. For a specialist like Monsieur Marambaud, there was no longer any doubt. The servant, having attempted to kill him, was now trying to save him. Then, in a dying voice, Monsieur Marambaud offered him some practical advice. For the washings and dressings, use water with coal tar soap. Denis replied, That is what I'm doing, sir. Monsieur Marambaud opened both eyes. Not the slightest trace of blood remained on the bed, in the room, or on the murderer. The wounded man lay on clean sheets. The two men looked at one another. Finally, Monsieur Marambaud said gently, You have committed a grave crime. Denis answered, I'm trying to atone for it, sir. If you do not denounce me, I will serve you as faithfully as before. This was no moment for contradiction. Closing his eyes, Monsieur Marambaud said firmly, I swear I will not denounce you. 2. Denis nursed his master back to health. He spent his days and nights without sleep, never leaving the sick room, prepared his medicines, poultices, and cool drinks, felt his pulse, counting the beats with anxiety, and cared for him with the skill of a nurse and the devotion of son. At every moment he inquired, So, sir, how are you feeling? Monsieur Marambaud would reply in a weak voice, A little better, my friend. Thank you. Waking at night, the wounded man would often see his servant sitting in an armchair, weeping and silently wiping away his tears. Never before had the former apothecary been surrounded with such care. Never had he been so pampered and cosset. At first, he told himself, The moment I recover, I will rid myself of this scoundrel. But now, beginning to convalesce, he put off parting with his murderer from one day to the next. He reflected that no one would ever treat him with such attention and sensitivity, that he held this man in his grip through the fear of exposure, and he warned him that he had deposited a sealed statement with a notary, which would deliver Denis to justice should anything similar ever happen again. This precaution seemed to secure him against any future attempts. Moreover, he wondered if it might not be more prudent to keep this man close by, in order to watch him carefully. Just as he had previously hesitated to acquire another, more profitable pharmacy, so now he could not arrive at a definite decision. There's still time, he told himself. Denis continued to be the same model servant. After his full recovery, Monsieur Marambaud kept him in his service. But then one morning, just as Monsieur Marambaud had finished his breakfast, he heard a great commotion in the kitchen. He rushed there. Denis, seized by two gendarmes, was fighting back with all his strength. The brigadier was intently making notes in a pocketbook. The moment he saw his master, the servant burst into tears, exclaiming, "You denounced me, sir. That's not right of you, you promised. You broke your word of honor, Monsieur Marambaud. It's not right, it's not right." Monsieur Marambaud, stunned and distressed at being suspected, raised his hand. "I swear to you before God, my friend, that I did not denounce you. I have no idea how these gentlemen gendarmes could have learned of your attempt to kill me." The brigadier started. "You say he wanted to kill you, Monsieur Marambaud?" The flustered apothecary replied. "Well, yes, but I didn't denounce him. I said nothing. I swear I said nothing. Since then, he has served me most diligently." The brigadier said sternly, "I have recorded your statement. The court will consider this new fact, which was previously unknown to it, Monsieur Marambaud. My orders, however, are to arrest your servant for the theft of 2 ducks stolen from Monsieur Duhamel, for which there are witnesses. My apologies, Monsieur Marambaud. I shall report your testimony." And, turning to his subordinates, he commanded, "Right, let's go." The gendarmes dragged Denis away. The lawyer insisted on the presence of mental derangement, bolstering his argument by using one crime to corroborate the other. He compellingly demonstrated that the theft of the 2 ducks had sprung from the same mental aberration that had led to the infliction of 8 knife wounds upon Monsieur Marambaud. He subjected all phases of this temporary insanity to a subtle analysis, asserting that it would, without a doubt, dissipate after several months of treatment in a reputable asylum for the mentally ill. With fervor, he spoke of the unwavering devotion of this honest servant, of the unparalleled care with which he had surrounded his master, the very man he had wounded in a moment of delirium. Touched to the very depths of his soul by this recollection, Monsieur Marambaud felt his eyes grow moist. The lawyer noted this. With a broad gesture, he flung out his arms, and the long black sleeves of his robe flew up like the wings of a bat. "Behold, behold, gentlemen of the court," he exclaimed in a voice trembling with emotion. "Do you see these tears? What more can I possibly say in my client's defense? What speech, what proof, what argument can equal these tears from his master? They speak louder than my words, louder than the law itself. They cry out, 'Mercy for one who was mad, but for a moment.' They plead for clemency. They forgive, they bless." He fell silent and took his seat. Thereupon, the presiding judge turned to Marambaud, whose testimony had been so favorable to his servant, and posed a question. "Nevertheless, sir, even granting that you considered this man insane, it remains unclear how you could have kept him in your service, for that did not make him any less dangerous." Marambaud, wiping his eyes, replied, "What is one to do, Mr. President? In these times, a servant is hard to find. I could not have found a better one in any case." Denis was acquitted and placed in a mental asylum at his master's expense. That is all. If you enjoyed this, don't lose sight of the channel, subscribe. And of course, don't be shy. Your comments and discussions are most welcome.